So there's a whole host of legal problems facing Donald Trump Sr. right now, from his own lawyers facing contempt to the dismissal of the special master he wanted for his Mar-a-Lago document stash to the looming final report from the January 6th committee. While committee chairman Benny Thompson says they are still deciding who will be the targets of their criminal referrals, we know that one possible target is, of course, ex-President Donald Trump himself. As I pointed out earlier, he still hasn't faced any legal consequences for his role in the insurrection, even though other countries, Germany, Peru, act decisively and quickly to quash attempted coups, to arrest the ringleaders who aim to overturn their democracies. Our own ex-president has yet to face any charges. Joining me now is a member of the January 6th committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat of California and chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, it's good to have you. I want to start to see if you could confirm some news. CNN reporting the committee is considering referrals for 4 individuals besides the ex-president. Those include White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, John Eastman, Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, and former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani. Can you confirm that?
What I can tell you, Chris, is our process. We've looked at the evidence. We've looked at, what individuals we believe there's evidence to support potential referrals. We looked at, each of the elements and matched it with the evidence. And we know we're not ready to announce anything. We will with our report. But we're not confining our examination just to the president or anyone else. And we'll be, making our findings known fairly soon.
I wonder if you could speak at least, and you don't have to speak for others, but at least for yourself, the trajectory of your thinking on this specific issue. It has been the focus, I think, of a fair amount of coverage, and I think largely because obviously everyone understands this is not a criminal body, so they understand that on the one hand, and then on the other hand understand that this is probably the most thorough investigation of these events that's happened, which appear to many to be plainly criminal. So the way that circle is squared is, will the committee refer? Talk me through your own thinking about the significance of these referrals.
We start out by examining the sort of history of when Congress makes referrals, and generally it's for things like contempt of Congress or lying before Congress. Here you had an attack on Congress.
Right.
So to me, this involves, core interest, obviously, of the Congress to be able to execute its lawful functions. It involved, trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power. But we were, I think, way out ahead of the Justice Department in the investigation for a long time. There are areas where we probably still are, and areas where they're out ahead of us. And we weighed the effect of a referral. It's obviously not required of Congress, and the Justice Department theoretically could view it in a couple different ways. They could view it as helpful, pointing out the evidence and the statutes, or they could view it as making it more difficult by giving it a suggestion that it's somehow political. Right. But I think what we've, at least certainly what I believe is that we have an independent responsibility, no matter what the Justice Department may do, when we believe that impeachable offenses have been committed, no matter what the Senate may do, we have to do our responsibility. And so I think there's a fair degree of consensus around that. And we'll be announcing, what form that takes very soon.
Yeah, there is obviously now the special counsel. There's an independent or quasi-independent process that's set up for these investigations, which we now are publicly confirmed under one ambit. Do you find that encouraging? And have you been generally encouraged are you generally confident they will get to the bottom of it?
I actually think that the appointment of special counsel was good. He looks like a very experienced prosecutor. He looks very serious and will be focused on this, entirely focused on this. And I think that's positive. The only concern I had, and that concern seems to be, now that we see what he's doing, without a lot of basis, was this going to delay things?
Right.
Was he going to have to come up to speed, or would he be able to bring over both the prosecutors who worked on this previously as well as the work product? It certainly appears from the subpoenas that have gone out, even in the short time since he was appointed, that no time has been lost. So you get all the benefit of a special counsel, their dedicated focus, an experienced prosecutor, someone who will make recommendations to the Attorney General that will be very hard for the Attorney General to refuse, someone who's aggressive. So I think there's a lot to be said for it. And he's also giving fresh eyes to this. I've been frustrated for some time that certain allegations don't appear to be the subject of DOJ investigation, like the former president's efforts in Georgia, the infamous call to find me 11,780 votes. And I would hope that he, if that's not currently part of what they're examining, will say, hey, why aren't we looking at this? Why are we leaving this to a local county district attorney, even one who's very capable?
There's a question now about another set of actions the committee might or might not take vis-a-vis referral, which is several colleagues of yours that have been subpoenaed by the committee and essentially ignored that subpoena, what to do about that. There's some talk about whether there would be a criminal referral there for contempt of Congress. But of course, this is all pretty dicey and uncharted territory, I think it's fair to say, and also happening on the eve of the majority switching, right? I mean, you're going to be on the other end of this in 3 weeks. How do you think through that?
Well, we have had to wrestle with this question continually, which is, should we do the right thing knowing that the Republicans, when they take over, might use the precedent to do the wrong thing? And my feeling is we do the right thing. And so we're examining what is the right way to treat members who are, contemptuous of a committee in Congress, unwilling to meet their obligations to the public. And I think there's reluctance to try to get some other institution, some other branch of government to police our own. So this is what we're wrestling with. Congress really ought to police its own, but what does that look like, and how do we accomplish that? So this is what we're determining, and again, we'll be letting the public know shortly what conclusion we've reached and how we think accountability ought to take place.
Finally, on that question of accountability, I spoke earlier in the show about some of the international headlines we've seen over the last few days in Germany, where what appears to be essentially seditious plot to overthrow the government was exposed and rounded up and arrested. In Peru, in which the president announced essentially a coup and was swiftly within police custody within a matter of hours. How you think we fare in the level of accountability that has been brought to bear on those who aided and abetted what was, a violent attempt to overthrow the constitutional order, unprecedented in its form in the long history of the nation?
I think the jury is still out, and maybe the jury is still out because the jury hasn't been called in for many of these cases yet. We're almost 2 years, Chris, since these events took place, and that's a long time to do these investigations. Many of them should have been done by now. And so I think we'll have to see, do we have accountability of the kind the Attorney General announced at the outset of this investigation, where everyone is equal before the law, or by virtue of being a former president or politically powerful or relevant, do you get to escape accountability? So I think it's still TBD, to be determined. But looking at these events in Peru and in Germany, one thing is very clear, and that is the threat to democracy at home and abroad is not over. These QAnon conspiracies, in Germany and in the United States have so much in common with their deep state dark fantasies, with the strands of anti-Semitism woven through them. And other despots and would-be despots in places like Peru. Look at the president of the United States, the foremost democracy in the world, trying to stay in power, engaging in illegal, if not corrupt acts, corrupt and illegal acts. And sadly, look at the former president as an example to be followed, not an example to be shunned.
All right, Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for your time.